night had wrapped the forest in a heavy, suffocating darkness, the kind that swallowed every trace of light. The only sound that filled the air was the soft, rhythmic crunch of my boots sinking into the earth with each step. I was alone, but the solitude didn't bother me. In fact, it was peaceful. After a long stretch of chaotic days, I had finally found a moment of stillness. This forest, in all its eerie quiet, was my escape. But then, out of nowhere, a sound sliced through the silence. A scream, faint, distant, but unmistakably desperate. A woman's scream, the kind of scream you hear only in nightmares. It echoed through the trees, so full of terror, so raw, that it seemed to vibrate in my chest. Someone was in trouble. Someone needed help. I froze, holding my breath, the sound hanging in the air. The scream came again, clearer this time, more panicked. My heart skipped. It was too far out here for anyone to be in trouble, wasn't it? This place was far from any road or village. No one should be out here. Yet the scream rang out again, louder, sharper, pulling me toward it. Without thinking, my feet moved, carrying me through the dense forest, my breath shallow. I didn't want to admit it, but a part of me was afraid. Still, I couldn't ignore the voice in my head urging me forward, telling me to help. I pushed past the fear, my eyes straining to see through the darkness, my steps growing faster. Minutes felt like hours as I followed the scream, and with every step, the fear inside me deepened. It wasn't just the scream, it was the way it seemed to grow closer with each moment, like it was waiting for me. My mind raced, but my legs carried me forward, as if some force beyond my control was guiding me. And then, just as I was certain I had to be near, the scream stopped. Complete silence. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood frozen, listening. The air had grown colder, and a knot twisted in my stomach. The silence felt suffocating, unnatural, as though the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. "Turn back," a voice inside me whispered, but I didn't listen. I couldn't. I had to find the source of the scream. I had to help, even if I wasn't sure I was really helping. I took a step forward, the darkness enveloping me further. The trees stood still, their branches creaking slightly in the wind. Then came the whisper, "You found me." The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone's voice I recognized. It was deep, cold, like something from the very heart of the forest itself. I spun around, but there was nothing behind me, just the shadows, stretching farther than I could see. I took another step, and again, the whisper echoed through the trees. "You found me." It felt wrong. The words sent a chill straight down my spine, and I was suddenly acutely aware of how far I had ventured into the woods, how alone I was. The trees, the ground, everything felt off. I wasn't just lost in the forest anymore, I was lost in something darker. And then the ground beneath me shifted. I stumbled, my feet slipped on the damp earth, and I crashed to the ground, my body jolting in all the wrong ways. For a moment, I just lay there, disoriented, trying to collect myself, but something was wrong. As I tried to get up, I realized my body wasn't moving the way it should. My muscles tensed, as though something invisible was holding me down, keeping me on the ground. From the shadows of the trees, a shape emerged, a silhouette, dark and formless. It moved towards me, its hands reaching out. The whisper came again, like a breath in my ear. "You found me." The figure got closer, and I saw something flicker in the darkness. Something pale, something lifeless. I could barely make sense of it. My head was spinning, my vision blurry, But there was no mistaking the figure. A woman, a pale, lifeless woman. Her body was gaunt, covered in nothing but the forest's shadows. But her eyes were alive, sharp, terrifying. I tried to move, but my body was frozen in place. I couldn't take my eyes off her. They were dark, hollow, but somehow they felt like they were staring right through me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and a scream echoed in my mind. Not from her, no, it was from me. But my mouth couldn't move. My breath was stuck in my throat. The voice again, "You found me." It wasn't just a whisper this time. It roared inside my head, pounding against my skull, rattling my bones. The woman didn't move, not at first, but her eyes, they never left me. They inched closer, and with each step, the world around me seemed to fade. The darkness closed in, and the wind shifted, sending a rustling through the trees that seemed to carry 1,000 voices, all whispering the same thing. "You found me." I blinked, trying to shake the fog that had settled in my mind. But when I opened my eyes again, she was gone. The woman was no longer standing in front of me. I was alone, standing in the middle of the forest. Or so I thought. I slowly turned around, only to find myself staring at the very same spot where she had been. The shadows shifted in the corner of my vision, and my breath hitched in my throat. Her eyes, I could feel them, even though I couldn't see her anymore. I took a step back, but my feet felt heavy, like I was sinking into the earth. Everything around me was spinning. The trees, the shadows, the wind, they all seemed to blur together. I tried to move, but it felt like I was stuck in place, trapped by something I couldn't understand. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard it. Another scream, but this one wasn't mine. This one was coming from deep within the forest. It was closer now, and it sounded familiar. I turned, and the world around me seemed to spin faster. The trees were bending, the shadows reaching out like hands. The scream grew louder, more frantic. I tried to run, but every direction led me deeper into the dark, and the voice, it was everywhere. It whispered in my ear, "You found me." And then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't sure where I was. The forest had vanished, and I was standing in the corner of an endless, dark space. My eyes started to close, exhaustion taking over, and all I could hear was the faint whisper of those 3 words, repeating over and over again. "You found me." The forest had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could find peace and quiet away from the noise of the world. But that day, everything changed. I had gone for a walk with my friends, deep into the woods. The air was cool, and the wind whispered through the leaves, carrying a sense of calm with it. The sky had turned an ominous grey, but no one seemed to mind. We walked slowly, enjoying the stillness, each of us lost in our own thoughts, listening to the rustling of the trees and the soft crunch of the ground beneath our feet. After a while, the group decided to press on, but I felt the pull of solitude. I wanted a little more time alone to breathe and clear my mind. So I stayed behind, telling them I would catch up shortly. Being alone in the forest had always felt right. As I wandered, I lost track of time, stepping deeper into the woods, surrounded by nothing but towering trees and the distant calls of birds. The silence was thick and comforting. The only sound was my feet pressing into the soft soil beneath me. But then, something changed. A strange feeling crept over me. I thought I heard something, a rustling sound, maybe a whisper, but when I turned to look, there was nothing. I stopped walking for a moment, unsure of what was happening. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't quite place it. I pushed the uneasy feeling aside and took a few more steps, trying to brush it off. The deeper I went, the stranger it all became. The hours seemed to stretch on, but when I looked up at the sky, it was as if the sun hadn't moved. It was stuck in one place, suspended in time. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Something whispered in my mind, telling me I was lost. I had to turn back. I made the decision to retrace my steps, but as I began walking, an overwhelming sense of dread settled over me. Where was I? Just a few minutes ago, I was walking with my friends, but now I couldn't find them. The forest looked the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. I turned around, hoping to catch sight of my group, but all I saw were trees, endless trees. I was lost. My heart began to race. Panic crept up my throat, and for a moment, everything went black. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. I had no idea how long I had been wandering, but when I finally saw a light through the trees, it felt like a beacon of hope. My chest tightened, and I hurried towards it. Finally, I broke through the trees and saw them, my friends. They were standing there, waiting for me, but something was wrong. Their faces looked pale, too pale. They were silent, staring at me with wide, fearful eyes. I approached them cautiously. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. I felt a chill that wasn't just from the cool air. They didn't say anything at first, their eyes filled with confusion and fear. One of my closest friends, the one who usually comforted me, stepped forward, her voice shaking as she said, "You got lost. We searched for you for 3 hours." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, I got lost? I just left a few minutes ago. I was with you." They exchanged nervous glances, and my stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. "No," another friend whispered. "You've been gone for hours. We didn't know where you were. We thought you were with us." I shook my head in disbelief. I wasn't gone long. I was right behind you. But they only looked at me with fear in their eyes. Their faces were pale, drained of color, and they seemed as though they hadn't slept in days. They were trembling, and I realized that their fear wasn't just from being lost, it was something deeper, something unexplainable. "Did I really get lost?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but no one answered. My eyes darted around, trying to make sense of it all, and that's when I felt its presence. Something was watching us. It was like the forest itself had come alive. The trees seemed to close in, and the air grew thick, heavy. "Yes," one of them finally said, their voice low, trembling. "This place, it bends time. It wants to make you lose yourself. Remember, you were with us just a few minutes ago. But now, it feels like we're with you, but we're lost, too. We've all been pulled in by this place." The words hung in the air, and my vision blurred as I tried to make sense of what was happening. I didn't know what to believe. I wanted to run, to get out of there, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The forest felt like it was swallowing us whole. The rest of my friends stood there, quiet, their eyes distant. Their fear wasn't just from the unknown anymore. It was something else. It was like they knew something I didn't, and I suddenly realized that it wasn't just me who had gotten lost. We all had. This place, this forest, had swallowed us up, and now there was no way out. I looked around once more. The light that had guided me toward them now seemed to fade, swallowed by the trees. With every step I took, it felt like they were moving further away from me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't catch up. They weren't looking for me. They weren't waiting for me. They, too, were lost. And I had gone too far to ever return. I had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I had gotten lost in the forest, and there was no way out. No one would save me. Not now, not ever. The forest had always drawn me in a different way. Maybe it was a kind of search for peace, or maybe loneliness. But that day, I wasn't alone in the forest. As I walked around the abandoned pond deep in the woods, I noticed how quiet everything was. The water of the pond was still, like darkened glass. The trees were almost motionless, as there was hardly any wind. Only the sound of my footsteps hitting the ground occasionally echoed. For a while, I walked along the pond. My thoughts weren't in place. I just wanted to breathe in the tranquility of nature. But suddenly, something caught my attention. On the opposite shore of the pond, a silhouette appeared in the darkness. My eyes focused on it. At first, I thought it was the shadow of a tree or some kind of illusion. But that silhouette became clearer with each passing second. A man, only his silhouette was visible. His features weren't clear, but it was certain that he was moving. A chill began to form inside me. That man was coming from the depths of the forest, moving somehow toward me. For a moment, I froze in place. My mind was in a haze. It was so clear, seeing him walk toward me. But why? Where was he coming from? No one should have been over there by the pond. This was an abandoned place. No one lived here. Why was that man there? Holding my breath, I started to take a few steps back. At first, I was silent, but the sound of my footsteps only amplified the fear in my mind. With every step I took, that silhouette moved closer. Slowly, but definitely, it was coming toward me. The distance between us seemed to be shrinking. A voice inside me whispered, "Turn around and leave," but my body wouldn't move the way I wanted it to. Following that silhouette felt like I was being drawn toward it. I quickened my pace and walked backward, but something felt oddly off. There was a strangeness, a kind of pressure. The shadow of the silhouette became more distinct in the darkness. With every step I took faster, it moved faster as well. As I moved toward the light, I suddenly realized that it had disappeared into the light. At that moment, I turned around. A feeling of madness filled my mind. I knew I had to run back to safety. I thought that, but at the same time, I felt another movement behind me. I dared to turn my head and look. Yes, there was something there. On the exact opposite side of the pond, a figure in the darkness was moving toward me. This was different from the others. I couldn't make out its face, but it was calling out to me. Slowly, but steadily, I heard its voice. "I'm coming for you," the voice said in a deep, hoarse tone. For a moment, I froze there. Fear infiltrated every part of me. The figure behind me was gone, but this new one was steadily moving toward me with every step. I turned my eyes, but the forest was still silent. There was something else where this figure was as it moved closer. I wanted to retreat, but it felt as though I was bound in some way, pulling toward it. I took a deep breath. At that moment, my hands began to shake. My heart raced so fast I could hear it in my ears. The figure was slowly, but steadily, coming toward me. Its face was still lost in darkness, but when I heard its voice again, everything went completely dark. "I'm coming for you," it said. This time, the voice was deeper, for a moment turning into an echo. I didn't want to hear this any longer. At that moment, I had only one thought: to run. I started to run quickly along the path around the pond. But with every step, I felt the same dark figure behind me. It was watching me, tracking every move I made. My body was filled with terror, but I kept running. My steps quickened, but the dark figure kept following me. My breath was gone. When I looked back, I could only see a light now. The water of the pond had disappeared into the darkness, but something was different. Behind that light, there was another silhouette. Just like me, someone else was there. Their voices mixed together. "I'm coming for you," a whisper, but this time, it was very close. When I turned my head, I noticed that the dark figure was only a few steps behind me. For a moment, everything around the pond blurred. As I ran quickly, I had no idea where I was going anymore. When I looked around, the light had turned into nothing but a dark void. The figure stood right in front of me. I held my breath and focused on its face, but there was no face. At that moment, a scream rose inside me, but my voice got stuck in my throat. "Why are you recoming with me?" The voice surrounded me. Slowly, steadily, it was coming closer. At that moment, my heart stopped. That person, that thing, it was coming with me. And I had gotten lost with the forest, with the pond, with everything.